Today, we take you back to 1999 with the WrestleMania 15 review, and the Podski starts now.
The Podski with John Baker. For over 1 year, the revolutionary force in audio entertainment.
Ooh, yeah!
Brother,
Let me talk to you! Freak out, freak out!
I just had an out-of-body experience!
The insane in the membrane!
Brother,
Yeah! And I'm here for only one reason, and that's to take it to the limit, yeah!
somebody stop the damn man!
I'm living on the edge.
Who is your daddy?
Hello and welcome to the Podski. I'm your host, Johnny Big Show, and joining me ringside is Teddy Mongoose. And 2 weeks ago, we reviewed WrestleMania 20, and today we're going back 5 years to 1999, and we're going to review WrestleMania 15. We had really good responses from that WrestleMania 20 show. We gained a lot of new subscribers on YouTube and across all the socials. We truly appreciate all of you joining us here on the Podski. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe and the like button. Follow us on the socials at _Podski on Twitter and Instagram. But Goose, I am super excited because what we gave the listeners in the WrestleMania 20 was a post-Attitude Era world. And now today, we're backing it up 5 years to the heart of the Attitude Era. And I'm excited to see what you got cooked up for us here in the dirt, because I know, I can tell you up front, I watched this show up front. This is a bottom 5 WrestleMania. This show is not good, but everything else surrounding this show, all of the iconic moments that you see on television, it's literally insane that the build for this thing is probably one of the best builds they've ever done in the company. And how do we cap off this run with this type of WrestleMania?
Yeah, so this is, as we just said before we got on, what a time to be alive this is. To go from the modernize that we watch everything with, and I'm talking strictly in terms of show layouts and ring work and match styles and everything. Even to go back 20 years, you could see some of those seeds being sown, right? We literally just did a WrestleMania where we had Guerrero versus Angle.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Benoit, Michaels, and Triple H all in the ring. And while Triple H would have been more of your traditional style bodybuilder type, psychological wrestler for the most part, and I don't mean, he really, and especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, he could go. But his longevity in that he could do a lot without doing a lot. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So he sort of was I don't know if you want to call it like almost a little bit of a throwback to that golden era style whenever it came to that. But here, this is something else, man. We are in an age of 2-minute matches and weird 2-minute matches with weapons and all kinds of rated R stuff in between, dude. And I'm not talking about, you think you know me. I mean, this is, I mean, I guess he's in there just a little bit, but holy cow, dude. Some of these things that I'm reading, I guess what stands out to me the most is that there are moments that contemporaries of mine, because I'm in middle school here, going into high school, right at that age. And so, I am the prime demographic here. And I could just remember just being so pumped for Raw. And my God, I see this as an adult and I'm just like, oh, I don't know, man. Reading it gives me the heebie-jeebies. I couldn't imagine watching these shows. I would be willing to bet that if you watched the Raws, if you would have gone back and watched all of them, that you're going to see a heavy amount of censorship, a lot of cuts, a lot of Raws that all of a sudden are 28 minutes long, things like that. Go ahead, tee me up, man. Let me set the table for 1999.
You are going to take us from 98 into 99, leading up to the Rumble here. So we set the table here for you, and it's time for you to hand out those nuggets and tendies for us here.
So we are at a inflection point. We are in now in officially a wrestling boom. So we started to go up before, and we are really, really peaking toward crescendo, which we will reach in about 2001. But here we are certainly on a major uptick, specifically with the World Wrestling Federation. So first I have some business trend notes, and then I actually have a breakdown on who and who is not a draw from 1998. So these are 1998 notes into 1999. So for the year 1998, the first thing is the average house show attendance or show attendance. This includes Raws, etc. In 1998, they are drawing 10,006 people per show. This is the WWF. In 1993, they were drawing 3,540 people a show. In 1997, they were drawing 5,826 people a show.
Whoa.
So this is 1997 is, that was really the WWF's turnaround point, where you had DX getting formed. You have the Bret Hart and Taker. Taker's still a top guy. Shawn and Taker. All those things are going on in 97.
Mhm.
And from 97 to 98, they have gone from 5.8 thousand to 10,000 people per show for live attendance. WWF's attendance increased 71.7% over the previous year. I should note, though, that at this time, WCW is doing 8,000 people a show. So they're on the downswing, but a lot of people are going to wrestling shows at this point in time.
That's crazy. You're in the boom period for sure.
You're telling me, man. So the ratings for the WWF increased 48% year over year. Pay-per-view buys increased 67.2% year over year. That was 97 to 98. WWF sold out 33.5% of all house shows in 1998 compared to 16.7% the year before. And they averaged $188,000 plus gross per show as compared to $94.562 thousand the year before. That is an increase of 99.3%. So their gross per live event has increased literally 100%. It is doubled. Dave also notes that the WCW peaked in March and has been on a decline ever since. This is March 1998. And the WWF's peak was in December of 98, and it seems to be on the ascent. One other thing that I want to get to before we start to segue into 99, I have a breakdown on biggest rating draws of the year 1998. And this uses wrestlers with 12 or more appearances on competitive Monday night situations. Okay. So it wouldn't have been the first Raw hour. It wouldn't have been a preempted for the dog show. They had to be head to head, and they had to be competitive shows.
So this would have been like Warzone?
This would have been this would have been the entire Raw show, because Raw's only 2 hours at this point in time. But it would have disqualified anything in the 8 o'clock hour for Nitro. And then it also would disqualify any time that for instance, if the WWF was preempted for the dog show and it's just Nitro by itself, they didn't count the Raw rating. Gotcha. If Nitro is preempted for NBA, which I don't even think happened at that point in time. I think it was bigger than the NBA, but they would have, that wouldn't have counted. Okay. So it's only head to head. So there are categories that I have here are big ratings movers, somewhat ratings movers, no real power one way or another, somewhat of a turnoff, or major turnoffs. I'm only going to talk about the the WWF guys first. So big ratings movers are Steve Austin, Vince McMahon, Mick Foley, and the Big Boss Man.
What? You're joking.
It is noted multiple times in this analysis that the Big Boss Man is the luckiest man in all of the analysis. Because if you think about it, John, he is in segments with Austin nonstop. He's in segments with McMahon. He's in segments with the Rock. So everybody that the Boss Man is in segments with, and when he's placed on the show, it does bump. And Dave is literally like, no one is luckier than the Boss Man right here.
So he's right place, right time all the time.
He exactly is, because, one of these things is there's not like the other, right? Austin, McMahon, Foley, Boss Man. Somewhat ratings draws are The Undertaker, The Rock, Billy Gunn, Road Dogg, Kane, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Mark Marrow.
What? Marrow?
Yeah. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of context here, because Dave doesn't dive deep into this, but I was alive and I watched WWF in 1998. Guess what we had when we had Mark Marrow?
Oh, we had Sable, didn't we?
We did. Or we had him restricting Sable from coming out
Gotcha.
to show herself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of nuance here. So we'll get to that. Interesting that The Rock is starting. Right? Starting. And I also want to say that as somebody that was literally prime demographic in this year, Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg, when they came out, that was one of my favorite parts of the entire show. I absolutely can see them being there. Like, they were that big of a deal. Not when they broke them up, we'll get to that. It worked. But together, man, they were a home run. They were great. No power, no drawing power. Edge, D'Lo Brown, X-Pac, Jacqueline, Mark Henry, Owen Hart, Draws, Gangrel, Hawk, Shamrock, the Oddities. He listed them all. And Sable. So Sable, less drawing power than Marrow. And the interesting thing that and sort of my own conclusion was that when Marrow was phased out, after they stopped him trying to cover her and stuff, then she was a little more overexposed and people didn't care as much. And somewhat turn off. What's that?
Until later on around WrestleMania, when they did that whole Playboy thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, you ain't lying about that. Somewhat of a turn off. These are mostly big guys. This is Farouk, Blackman, Scorpio, The Godfather. I say mostly, but then Kai Enai's in there. And then major turn off. These are all big guys. And I mean like big burly men. But the most important one here, I should note, Jeff Jarrett. Because I told you, dude, I hated Jeff Jarrett's guts growing up. I wanted, every time he came on, I just wanted the TV to explode. And apparently I wasn't alone here. Also, the DOA, Chains, Bradshaw, Bart Gunn, Mark Canterbury, Bob Hawley, Tiger Ali Singh, and then Val Venus and Deborah. And you know why Deborah's on there? Because Jeff Jarrett's on there.
Oh,
yeah. Not even Deborah's cans could make people want to watch Jeff Jarrett.
Wow.
He does note that the conception that the WWF was younger at the time was wrong. The Rock was the only under 30 somewhat from the WWF as a somewhat ratings draw. But we should note that the Giants and Jericho were included in somewhat ratings draws, and they're coming very soon. But the WWF did not have young guys then. So the whole thing was, oh, they were younger. They weren't. He also does specifically state that Mark Marrow is, by these numbers, a bigger draw than Sable. The WWF had no top women's draws at the time. And I noted on here, this is wild because Fully Loaded 98 is in this year. So the people that watched were young men and not everybody.
Yeah.
That's another thing. You know what I'm saying? So you are going to polarize your audience a little bit when it comes to that.
Yes.
So we come in hot, major fire, right? I have one big story and then just a few notes before we get into the first major pay-per-view of that year.
Yes.
The biggest story that I have, and I could talk for 25 minutes about this. The write-up was fantastic. I will save it for a later show. From the January 25th, 1999 Wrestling Observer newsletter, Quote, the career as an active wrestler of Shawn Michaels appears to have largely ended, certainly as any kind of regular in-ring performer, stemming from a back injury suffered at the 1998 Royal Rumble. So he kicks off by saying Shawn is done. A couple of notes on the surgery first. He undergoes major back surgery on January 12th in San Antonio. The doctor said that the discs in his back were more severe than originally believed, and he's telling his friends wrestling days are over. He, before the surgery even happened, was telling people privately he believed he had about 5 matches left in him. This is in 1999. Dude, he does 5 matches the week of WrestleMania 20.
On a torn ACL.
Yeah. On a torn ACL. You got that. So the surgery, which lasts in excess of 4 hours, wound up with the doctors discovering discs in Michaels' back were largely destroyed. And this came from the bump in the casket match versus The Undertaker on January 18th, 1998. Michaels is 33 years old, and the bump that Michaels took is eerily similar to that in Japan that ended the career of Rick Rude. Which, if you've never seen it, it's the same thing. Rick Rude comes off of one of those platform style deals, and just on that weirdo part of his lower back gets a crunch and it's party over. Notes that he came back in tremendous pain for one final match versus Steve Austin on March 29th, 1998 at Mania 14. He was advised to undergo back surgery afterwards, but wanted to avoid the knife and hoped that if he just rested, it would recover well enough for him to return. And during that time, he did not recover. And there were rumors, but Dave at this time refutes them and says that the WWF never locked in any booking angles because it was never clear if he was going to be able to return or what the timetable of his return was going to be. But they did hope that he would be on WrestleMania 15.
Wow. I mean, technically he was, just not in a match.
Right. You're right. So the write-up is great. It goes from him being a high school football player that loved Ric Flair, goes through all the stuff in AWA, WWF, the Rockers, singles run, turn. The one thing that I do need to say out loud is that it notes that he won and then did not lose in the ring the Intercontinental Championship twice, the Tag Team Championship twice, and the World Title once. So he is a Triple Crown winner and also a Triple Crown winner that never lost any of those belts in the ring.
Insane.
The article then finishes by saying that Shawn says, quote, in some form or Dave says, quote, excuse me, Dave says in some form or fashion, he'll be back again, but at best, if he does get in the ring, it'll only be a few more times.
Wow. Yeah, we all know that was not a few more times. It was a lot more times, but not.
It was. And you know, what's so wild about that is the fact that he came back and performed at the level that he did with a back that was that bad. You know what I'm saying? Like it really is crazy, man, that it was to the point where he's 33 years old. It's not even like he's older here and they're saying, you might as well be done. Dude, he's 33 years old. He's 3 years older than Will Ospreay.
Yeah.
Think about how young Will Ospreay seems today.
Yes.
And Shawn's 3 years older than him right there. Shawn, when he was done, is 5 years younger than Kenny Omega is now. It's a mind F. It really is.
It really is when you think about it. Damn.
Yeah. So before we get into the Rumble, just a couple of news notes, tidbits that I have to say out loud. Terry Taylor quit the WCW before Nitro on 118 to take a job working with Vince Russo and Ed Ferreira scripting television shows. Dave said it really should help because he hates the Undertaker storyline so bad. The Jericho news at this time is that Bischoff and Jericho have heat because EB claims that Jericho verbally agreed to a deal but won't sign it. And I actually remember reading that in real time. And he might have actually talked about that later, the back and forth with that.
Yeah.
The WWF has made Jericho its number one priority as far as acquiring any new talent. Mick Foley called Tony Schiavone about the comments with butts and seats. So
Wow.
on the phone, rang him up and said, brother, what's the deal? And Tony said that he was ordered to say what he did by Eric Bischoff. Bret Hart ripped on Shawn Michaels' potential retirement.
So he's still the same Bret that we all know.
Yeah. Dude, so Bret straight buries Shawn and his pending retirement. He basically says that, are you retiring because you're injured, or are you retiring because of how scared you are that people are going to injure you because of what you did to me? That's essentially what he says.
Wow.
Dude, this guy just doesn't stop. And also, WWF officials are expected to meet with Tank Abbott and Chemo over the weekend about a possible Brawl for All rules match with Bart Gunn at WrestleMania.
Well, we'll see how that ends up, because I got some things to say about that when we get there.
You ain't lying, brother. We will. And then we also have notes that Trish Stratus, a fitness model, was on Off the Record in Canada on January 19th, saying she's looking to get into the WWF as a valet. Halftime Heat is announced.
Nice. Those are great notes to lead us right into the Rumble.
Lot of stuff there, my man. Okay, brother, go ahead. Did you watch the Rumble 99?
I did watch some of the Rumble 99 because there was just so much leading up to there's so much that I couldn't sit and watch the entire thing. Well, from what I did watch, I watched the Rock and Foley I Quit match for the WWF title, and I was flabbergasted that Mick Foley was the WWF champion at the Royal Rumble. And this match, it's one of the most famous I Quit matches that you're going to find across wrestling history, but it's a hellacious, gruesome display of violence and, them handcuffing Mankind and beating the absolute piss out of him with that chair. What we know about CTE now and brain injuries and stuff like that makes you think twice about it when you're watching it. But the way that The Rock wins that match, it gives you the heebie-jeebies watching it back.
Don't forget about Beyond the Mat, man. That was what made that even worse. And before I even had a kid, like I haven't watched Beyond the Mat. It'd be cutting it close, but certainly not since Baby Mongoose has been up and verbal and able to comprehend everything. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the weirdest part of that to me, is that you don't give your kid a front row seat. And I understand why, but like not today. Just say daddy isn't booked tonight.
Yeah.
It's wild. So the 1999 Royal Rumble from the Observer Reader Poll gets and this is interesting, 31% thumbs up, 47.9% thumbs down, and 10% thumbs in the middle. People were not a fan of this show.
Yeah, there really wasn't anything outside of the Foley I Quit match and then the Rumble. And the Rumble is surrounded by the Vince and Austin story where they keep screwing Austin and he comes out 1 and Vince is going to come out 30. HBK makes the ruling that Vince has got to come out 2. So they come out 1-2 and then they end up brawling out into the concourse and into the bathroom. And it's just a setup to get Austin away from the match. And then it was kind of weird, but the way that they brought Austin back into the match and the big pop at the end, everyone was pissed off that Austin lost the Rumble and Vince won. And I think that's probably why there's a lot of thumbs down, if I had to guess.
Yeah, well, and the best match poll only had 1 out of every single listener, or not listener at that time, reader or phone caller or fax machiner. That's so cool. Mankind and Rock was the match of the night.
It's so cool that we're 5 years removed from WrestleMania 20, where you had actual like listeners and internet like users and readers and stuff like that, and it's not even a thing, like not even as big of a thing. It's all send-ins and actual readers of the magazine.
It's insane the difference. And well, here's the thing, even in 2004, when I would go to, because I was in college then, and I can't remember whenever my parents made the changeover from dial-up to cable internet, but it's close
Yeah.
to 2004. And
Same.
so you still did have a contingency of people that, they're clicking the video on a web page and then they're going and making coffee, eating a sandwich, taking a nap, doing whatever before it's going to come up. Yeah, but you're right about that media is already really starting to change. But here, this is people straight calling Dave on the phone. I mean, might get a couple of emails or whatever, but he's getting fax messages at this time saying thumbs up. I wish it could have been me, man. I do. But worst match on this show though, 5 different votes. Sable versus Luna was the top one. Royal Rumble match, Ken Shamrock versus Billy Gunn, Big Boss Man versus Jesse James, and then the Mankind versus Rock. And that's obviously going to be because of the brutality that was there, I'm assuming. To go into what you were stating about the match itself, Raw before and then with the fallout, we are actually, I don't want to say setting up, but we're sort of setting up halftime heat here.
Yes.
So you have a huge Rumble main event that's there to get as many viewers as possible to tune in on the night when the most people watch TV all year long. And that's not a bad thing. It really isn't. Dave actually lauds like how brilliant it was to be able to book TV time on USA specifically during halftime. And it really was. I remember halftime heat to this day, dude. I went from the living room into the side room and turned it on and was just totally enthralled by the whole thing. So for the Rumble itself, some notes that I have here. It was sold out weeks in advance. There were 14,816 people there, 13,000 plus that were paid. Dave says, as a produced event, it was a spectacular event, even by WWF standards, with great videos, some interesting booking twists, and even if the final results were predictable, some of the well-produced ideas which took place outside the ring were excellent. As far as wrestling, there was nothing on the show that really stood out. And in that regard, the show was a disappointment. And it showcased badly the WWF's lack of depth, which is an interesting note because that Rumble is full of jabrones.
It really is.
Jabrones.
Yes.
Like you guys were laughing whenever we did the Rumble 04 about the people that were in here. Yeah, you try throwing Kai and Tai and DOA and stuff like that into the mix, man. And those were your filler people. No offense to Kai and Tai and DOA, but you know how that is. Or you would say rather that the finish of the Rock and Mankind I Quit match was savage in its brutality. Many would say that it is needlessly savage. And then he notes that it's not conducive to putting on entertaining pay-per-view shows because fans, and by entertaining pay-per-view shows, I mean with long matches, because fans don't have the attention span to watch matches for more than 8 minutes, and fans only care about a few major issues, making even well-worked short matches like X-Pac versus Gangrel, when I read that, almost devoid in the heat. He also notes that this is toned down. That points back to the Mark Henry angle where he was, having something portrayed on him by a man that was dressed as a lady. But he does note that in spite of that, WWF sponsorship is at an all-time high. The last thing that I'm going to say about the Rumble before I get into post-Rumble notes is that for the main event of the title match, Dave notes, congratulations to Brian Alvarez on the Observer Hotline for picking the finish correctly, having them play a tape of Mankind saying, I quit. And then he notes that it is evident, was evident the Rock wasn't going to take any punishment while Foley was going to take a ton. He knocks the Rock's selling. So in a sarcastic manner says, Rock, being the experienced at selling and putting his foot over for that. And then he says in parentheses, Rock's shortcoming in the ring, not evident much in recent months, were really getting exposed in this match because the style necessitated selling moves and body part injuries to get over. So, it's pretty crazy that Dave isn't Yeah, he's not all bought in. And now if The Rock comes out and just eats dog food, Dave's going to say, Dwayne told me that this is going to happen. This is the greatest thing that I ever heard. So, how the times change.
For real, for real. And this is at a point too where he came off that pec surgery, correct?
Yes, I actually later on I had the note of when he exposed that, but you are correct. He is wearing the shirt here because he has gynecomastia surgery, which Dave calls bitch tit syndrome, is what he says.
Hey,
So that is that The Rock gets a little cosmetic surgery here. At the time, I had no idea why he was wearing fake Adidas pants. That was the part that bothered me the most. It wasn't the wind shirt that he had, but it's the fact that he had pants with 2 and not 3 stripes on it.
yeah, like where are the Adidas pants, dude? Yeah, no, that drove me nuts throughout this whole entire build is that he's literally in the jumpsuit the entire build of WrestleMania.
And this is pretty interesting. Sick chair shot city, overkill to the point of 11 full force, brutal chair shots to the head that left Mankind in the aisle covered in blood while the tape played, saying, "I quit." This finish, and I'm not talking about the screw job aspect of it, didn't remotely qualify as entertainment. Maybe carrying that a guy who was formerly such a brilliant performer may wind up with no brain cells later in life qualifies you as someone who doesn't get it. So, so,
He's
so
going
Dave's
in
standing
already.
he's standing up for brains then. He said, and then says, after the Hell in a Cell match with Foley and Taker, 80% of the calls were glowing about Foley's performance. 20% were concerned about the mentality of him doing so. After this match, 90% of calls were negative toward the finish, with almost nobody in awe of doing what he did. Still gave the match 3 3/4 stars. And then he says, hopefully we will never see anything like that again. So pretty wild. Just check this out here. So the working idea for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre is McMahon and Austin in a cage match. Rock versus Triple H for the WWF title.
Whoa.
Shamrock versus Billy Gunn versus Val Venus in a triangle match for the IC title. And then he says a few more matches, but I really wanted to note there that the Rock versus Triple H for the WWF title as a working idea sort of stood out to me. Obviously it didn't happen.
That's really interesting considering that he doesn't really get thrown into the upper echelon yet, and that they have the idea that he is going to be a guy for the title. Now that doesn't happen until later in 99, but that's pretty interesting.
So right away, it's on his radar, and if it's on his radar, that means it's being talked about backstage, right? That's just it. Is that he doesn't make things up. He might not be right because he might not be talking to the right people, but Triple H in February is on the radar as a title talk about guy. I thought this was interesting too. It wouldn't surprise me much to see them do a fluke finish in the Austin versus McMahon match where McMahon wins again. So it ends up with Austin versus McMahon at Mania with grandiose steps. The interesting note here, though, is that Dave is pitching the idea of Rock versus Mankind at Mania and Rock versus Austin at SummerSlam.
Okay.
So with him saying the working idea being Rock versus Triple H, potentially Mankind is going to take a step back, and then we are going to do the quote-unquote blow-off with the Rock versus Mankind at Mania and then save Austin for SummerSlam. But obviously at this point in time, title changes happen so fast, and that was the match that everybody wanted anyway, so I'm not surprised. I do need to note before we move on here that we got major heat in Winnipeg. Are you familiar with the Winnipeg situation?
No.
So there is this contingency of like school board parents that were on this anti-WWF crusade. And I remember this from then. And this actually was one of the things that spurred the Outside the Lines. There's an Inside Edition thing that comes. So this literally turns into this like mom group,
Okay.
saying your product is ruining my kid's childhood, and with the argument of you can just turn it off, and they're saying, no, it's infecting the waters. Like you're normalizing too many bad things.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. It's a really deep and wild story. And I don't know if anybody, in mainstream or even, wrestling subculture podcast land has covered it. But I would love if somebody could do a deep dive. There's a lot of threads that work into the Observer here, but I couldn't do enough digging to go back with everything else that we had to look at. The WWF at this time, though, is offering to send wrestlers to Winnipeg to speak to kids about how what they do is just performance and everything. And it's not really working. Don Callis, still technically under contract for 2 more weeks, noted that that kids can still program VCRs if the bad stuff is going to be moved later on at the 10 o'clock hour. So I did love the VCR plugs there coming from Callis.
Yeah.
And that's the state of where we are here. Our post Rumble Raw it's a wild one, man. You talked about those major points that we have. Our Raw after Rumble has McMahon saying that he's giving his title shot to The Rock.
Yes.
It has. Were you watching at this time?
No.
So you weren't allowed.
No, not yet.
Yeah, because this stuff's too raunchy, right? It's too terrible. Before we get to say Valentine's Day Massacre,
yeah,
we'd be remiss, John, if we didn't talk about Halftime Heat.
What happens at Halftime Heat?
Yeah. So here's the thing, and again, I mentioned it before. Talked a little bit that I remembered sprinting to the living room. This match is an empty arena match, happens in Tucson on the day of the Super Bowl, airs during halftime. It's an 18-minute long, Dave calls it movie fight scene. So it's edited down to 18 minutes, which is interesting because then we get cinematic matches later, right?
Uh-huh.
Never even really thought about that, but this is sort of where this starts. And then he says that it is a rousing success from a rating standpoint, continuing for a promotion that has caught unbelievable fire. So the 20-minute long segment drew a 6.59 rating, making it the single most watched WWF wrestling match from start to finish ever on cable.
Nice.
So there have been segments that have been higher, but that is the highest rated match start to finish ever. And he basically gives a rundown of the match. This was Mankind taking the punishment, Rock doing not a lot, Rock's post-surgery here. This makes a lot of sense. At one point in time, Mankind rolls down 40 rows of seats. For the finish, Mankind drops a forklift with beer kegs onto the Rock's chest, with cameras not showing the obvious lack of impact, and Mankind jumped on top for the pin for his second title reign. So that is where we are there. We have Mankind as the champion again, and that leads us to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So, John, did you watch?
I did watch a little bit of the Valentine's Day Massacre. Things that they noted here is they build this as the final chapter of McMahon and Austin. They kept saying it over and over and over again for this steel cage match. They do make The Rock versus Mankind for the WWF Championship. It is a last man standing match, so they get the rematch from Halftime Heat. It basically seemed like the whole thing that they're trying to do here is just kill poor McFoley. And it was not quite as bad as the I Quit match, but I mean, they were still brutalizing poor Foley here. And Rock becomes your champion in the last man standing match. And that's how they, and then watching the steel cage match with Vince and Austin, the biggest thing I noticed was that it was the old school cage and then they put the new style top on there. And they painted it black and it looked okay, but it just, that old style in this era looks really weird to me visually, and the kind of stuff that they did, it felt like they were going a little long for me, and just having Austin chase McMahon around the whole time trying to get him in. then just beating the tar out of him once he got in there. Obviously, the big angle here at the end is whenever Paul White or Big Show pops up through the ring. He ends up throwing Stone Cold into the cage, and the cage opens, and then that's how Steve Austin wins. The cage door swings open, the whole half of the cage swings open, and that's how Austin escapes, puts both feet on the floor, and wins, and basically foiled McMahon's master plan that he had to beat Austin. The ending obviously is an incredibly creative finish. It looked really good. I really enjoyed the ending. It took a little while to get there, but they made, I don't know, I just feel like this was the beginning of the end for Big Show, because they made this poor guy look like an idiot the rest of the way. Even at WrestleMania, they made the poor guy look like a moron. But overall, it felt like another one match show where we're just trying to continue the story with Austin and McMahon, but we also got Rock and Foley, where we're just going to beat the holy hell out of Foley.
Interesting you said that, because I noted earlier that the Big Show got liposuction, and I wanted to do that because we've all listened to Something to Wrestle With and heard all those other things, and you talk about these guys that came in and then got heat because of the shape that they were keeping. This isn't too far off from Vader, right?
Yeah.
That part of it with Vader was you're not. Now, my thing is dude, Vader at SummerSlam 96 looks just like Vader at SummerSlam 93. I don't really know what the difference is. I guess, not everybody can go from Walter to Gunther, right? You think about Walter as being that, just big, massive man that turns into this svelte Austrian with these pan hands that is just going to smash your face. I don't know if that's what they wanted from these guys or what here. The show, I do understand more than Vader, at least, for getting heat coming in, that if you needed lipo, we seen him puff the burners on his way to the ring whenever he was in WCW. Like, I get all of that. But at the same time, you also didn't need to give the guy a 10-year contract worth $1 bajillion. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the part that I don't really understand there. For this show, overall, rated by Observer readers, 70 thumbs up. That was 47.3%. There was 29% thumbs down and 23% thumbs in the middle. So again, pretty split overall, a thumbs up, but most of the people, 60% of your audience, essentially, a little bit. Best match was Rock and Mankind. That was the match of the night. Austin and McMahon actually did get 36 votes for match of the night. And then Kane and China versus Triple H and X-Pac got 8 votes for match of the night. So I thought that was really cool. Worst match overall, Big Boss Man versus Midian. And I don't blame him. Not even seeing it. It had to be absolutely terrible. But John said that this show seems like a one-match show. We had Mankind presumably retaining his WWF title. And I remembered this one only after reading the summary. In a no contest with The Rock, in 21 minutes, they did a 10-count knockout. So these guys both were hammering on each other. Mankind uses Socko. Rock uses the Rock Bottom. Both collapsed. It appeared neither would beat the 10 count. Both staggered up. They both delivered chair shots simultaneously, which is what I remembered. And then they go out for the 10. And fans went nuts. Booed the finish. Hated it. Dave still gave it 3 1/4. But that was the part that I remembered, was them hitting each other over the head together and then falling down.
Wow.
And then for our McMahon and Austin match, Dave gave that 2 3/4 stars. And so that closes the chapter on the pay-per-view between. A couple of things to note here is that Dave is saying that it is now rumored that we might end up with a 3-way deal with Austin, Rock, and Mankind for the title at Mania. So Austin versus Mankind. And then they face The Rock for the championship at the end. A little bit of a Daniel Bryan situation. We had Road Dogg go into rehab. We noted that. He notes that there's a lot of internal heat on Sable these days. WWF is trying to keep it smooth because they think that her Playboy cover is going to do huge business. Also, Mark Marrow was recently asked to do a character copying his Johnny B. Bad gimmick and said no. And so Johnny B. Bad, Mark Marrow off TV, and they're trying to find reasons to bring him back, which are probably just going to end up embarrassing him anyway. So I don't blame him for that. And this is a guy that loved Johnny B. Bad. So we watched WrestleMania 15, March 28th, 1999, First Union Center in Philadelphia, in front of a sellout crowd of 18,274 people. There were 16,756 paid. They did announce 20,276 people being there. Should note that.
Yeah.
We have a $1.438 million gate. They sold $274,000 in merchandise. And according to the polls right after the show, which I didn't even check the final poll because I didn't want to, we have 55% thumbs up, 25% thumbs down, 19% thumbs in the middle. Best match overwhelmingly was Austin versus Rock. And the reason I didn't go back, second for match of the night, Butterbean versus Bart Gunn. That got 16 votes.
I know, I saw that and I couldn't believe that. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it got 16 votes. Shane McMahon and X-Pac got 13. And what stands out to me is, as somebody that watched this show live at his buddy's house, I remembered thinking, oh my gosh, this match is awesome. And hating Shane at the time. Do you know what I mean? So I'm glad that got its props. Worst match poll, Undertaker versus Bossman was 93 votes. The winner of that one. Before the show, Dave did note that he heavily suspected that the Undertaker versus Bossman match would break the 4+ star streak that Hell in a Cell matches had coming into this one. We will get to that in just a few moments. But Dave's quick write-up here is that it will likely prove to be the biggest revenue-grossing show in pro wrestling history. Steve Austin regained the WWF title in a show far more notable for production and booking than for any of the wrestling. So the reaction to this show was all across the board. People thought it was the best show in years, and many thought it was terrible. If wrestling shows constituted by the quality of matches from start to finish, this was a thumbs down. If this was based on surprises, booking angles, it's a thumbs up. If it's based on crowd reaction to either and both, it's a thumbs up. It wouldn't be a thumbs up because only the main event had crowd heat. And if it's based on presenting well-produced television, it would be the best wrestling pay-per-view of the year. So John, Dave says, great produced wrestling show, terrible wrestled show with a very good main event. What say you?
I thought that it was exactly that. It was terribly wrestled, but the angles were good. It's the Attitude Era, and there's not a lot of good wrestling. It's not what you see today. The in-ring product is not good. And I don't care what anyone says, the in-ring product is not what's shining here. It's the storytelling and the characters behind all of it.
I do think that a lot of the nostalgia that people have for this particular time in wrestling is geared strictly back to them being young people talking to their friends about how awesome wrestling is and not actually paying attention to how good the wrestling is not. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it almost was like that the WWF was actually like Vanderpump Rules, right? And I don't even watch Vanderpump. I don't even know what it is, but I do know that people love the characters and they want to, it gets all kind of heat and they get really into things. You're a Vanderpump guy, so like you can admit, I would assume, that you're not watching like this beautifully written drama. You're watching like car crashy, cotton candy TV, but it's good. And I feel like that's what wrestling is at this point in time.
Yeah, it's the characters and everything that you've invested a lot of time in. They're doing really good things, but the actual show overall is not great by any means, but it's the individual things that happen that make it really good.
Yeah.
And in with rose-colored glasses, people remember all the high points. They forget about all the low points. And there's a lot of low points here that we're going to see, especially on this show. There's so many low points on this show.
Right. Without question. All right, go ahead. Take us to the first match.
So we start the show off hardcore championship match, and it's of note that you brought up about Road Dogg leaving and going to rehab, and that's how we got the flip-flop. Billy Gunn was in the Intercontinental Championship scene, and then all of a sudden Road Dogg was flipped into it, and then Billy Gunn went to the hardcore championship scene. Like, they just switched roles. Road Dogg going to rehab, that makes a lot more sense now.
And especially with the Billy Gunn heat, because Billy Gunn is in place for a push. And what happened is that basically he's rubbing people the wrong way backstage, and they didn't want to give him the shove with whatever he was doing. God only knows. And they didn't want to set a standard for basically you could be a jerk off backstage and still get your push.
Right.
So that, I think that was another part of it too.
Yeah, so this is a triple threat match for the Hardcore Championship to start off WrestleMania. We have Billy Gunn, Al Snow, and Hardcore Holly. Hardcore Holly wins this match. She becomes your Hardcore Champion by an opportunity finish after Billy Gunn hit the Famouser on Al Snow, but Hardcore broke the count with a chair shot and then threw Billy Gunn out of the way and then took the pin from Billy. So this was a quick match that got the crowd up. They did boo Hardcore Holly winning. They really wanted to see Billy Gunn win here. But there was some really cool spots with Al Snow beat the tar out of everybody with a broomstick. Also beat up people with a hockey stick that got some Flyers chants. So the crowd was up for this one. Match 2, we get D'Lo and Test versus Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart for the World Tag Team Championship. The tag team of D'Lo and Test was made on Heat before WrestleMania, and that's how they became a team. And D'Lo lost his tag team partner, who was Mark Henry, in the weeks prior to Jeff Jarrett, who put him in a figure four. D'Lo's been hunting down Jeff Jarrett, so you get this weird tag team of D'Lo and Test. Owen and Jarrett is, to me now, is an interesting tag team. It sounds like back then everybody hated Jeff Jarrett, but I found them interesting going back and looking at them now. They did the distraction on the outside with PMS, all the other divas kind of standing on the outside. Owen and Jarrett, they end up retaining, and they do a really cool finish where Owen comes over the top with a drop kick off the top rope, and then Jarrett brings him down around, and then that's how they pin him. It was a really interesting finish that they had as a tag team together. I like whenever tag teams have finishers together. It was a really quick match, and these were boom, boom. These were in the first 15 minutes of the show.
See, I did not like the Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett tag team. And the reason why is I was not a Jeff Jarrett guy, man. Haven't been, and I've come around to him some because I've gained a lot of respect for him as a worker in his 50s for what he's able to do just as being a gimmick, man. And I do have a lot of respect for that he's in incredible shape today, and that he's a smart worker that can go on and do things that, gets him going. But when you said about people not liking this tag team, I didn't at this point in time. I thought that this was just nails on a chalkboard. However, I mean, an interesting concept to throw two guys together in a battle royal ahead of time. I should note that battle royal before the show had Public Enemy, Viscera, Gilbert, Animal, 8-Ball, Skull, Hawk, Scott Taylor, Farouk, Tiger Ali Singh, Mark Henry, Jeff Hardy, Midian, Brian Christopher.
Talk about Jobber Central.
Oh, dude. Steve Blackman, Bradshaw, Godfather, and Draws.
Yeah. Awful.
And then we ended up with, D'Lo and Test. My God. What a time to be alive here. And did you know, John, that this is also, but I am fairly certain that we talk about bad taste television, that in between the buildup from Rumble to Mania, and when that television would have been, I'm not completely sure. But I do believe that we have a D'Lo Brown and Terry Runnels miscarriage angle happen.
I don't remember that at all. What a shit idea.
They had her get hit and fall. And if it's not D'Lo, then D'Lo, if you happen to be a listener, which, dude, if you're a listener, DM John on one of the socials. We love you, man. But D'Lo, my God, I feel for you. But yes, it was absolutely an angle at this point in time that, and again, dude, when they're running these shows, it is car crash TV that somehow was working, and they would just throw a million things against the wall and go with what sticks. And it's insane to me to think that you can have a miscarriage angle not stick and then just roll on with it. And they absolutely did.
Wow. No wonder.
Yeah.
I can't. We're going to finish the show with a big story. No wonder that big story happens.
Yes. Yeah. It's over and over again. Just repeat it. All right. So Dave gave the tag match 1.25 star. He gave the first match 1.25 star. So we're off to a hell of a start. What do we got next?
We got the Brawl for All finals. So you mentioned that they were thinking about bringing in Tank Abbott for the Brawl for All finals, but what they ended up doing was they got Butterbean. So it was Butterbean versus Bart Gunn. We did have 3 judges out there. We had Kevin Rooney, Chuck Wepner, and Gorilla Monsoon, and this was the very last appearance of Gorilla Monsoon before his death later this year in 1999.
Yeah, Dave noted that he lost a ton of weight, got one of the biggest pops on the show.
He really did.
Good for him, and really, dude, good for him. It's impossible to speak about these people, like we know them because we don't. And the more you find out about people, the more you wish you didn't look up to them. But Gorilla always was. He was a big part of my childhood, and I was happy if he got to go out with that. We still love you before we still love you was a deal. That's really awesome.
Yes. So pretty much, if you don't already know what happens, this ends up being a complete disaster for the wrestling business. Butterbean knocks out Bart Gunn within seconds of this. And I don't even think that Bart Gunn even threw a punch. And they took more time setting this matchup than it actually took in the ring. It was really, really bad. So I can't believe that people actually thought that this was the second best match on the show.
I think that they picked it for second best match on the show because of the spectacle that it was. I would assume so anyways. But dude, we have a boxer versus a not boxer, right? And Dave says exactly that. He says that it's clear from this first exchange that Gunn is dangerously over his head. Butterbean knocked him down 20 seconds in. Gunn barely made it to his feet at 9. And then he knocks him out. Butterbean may be considered a joke in boxing circles, but he does this for a living. And even 40 fights versus hand-picked opponents is still worlds apart from Gunn knocking out pro wrestlers that have never boxed in their lives. Probably the most compelling, interesting WTF thing about this was the San Diego Chicken.
Yes, the San Diego Chicken comes out and he gets knocked out.
Yeah, and Dave said that was a really poor taste after a dude got his head knocked off.
Yes.
To then throw a working punch to a giant mascot chicken. No star rating on that because it was a shoot fight and you don't rate shoot fights. So
yeah, it was wild. Not good. Really, really bad. So we get some Mankind stuff backstage. Actually, Big Show and Mankind had fought each other backstage on Heat. Then do a backstage interview with Kevin Kelly with Mankind. Basically, they're talking about the upcoming match, and then we go into this match. So it's Big Show versus Mankind, and the winner becomes a special guest referee in the main event of Austin and Rock. There is a point in this match where Big Show does a backdrop on Foley, and I thought that Foley was going to be squished like a bug on a window. It looked horrifying. After everything that Foley had been through on this run to WrestleMania, he gets absolutely smushed like a bug on the mat. And then like you
say that it says it says about that backdrop spot onto here as being a really good spot. Dave notes that. Oh yeah, dude. Dave notes that Mick Foley must be really hurting here. I guess his knee is bad at this point in time, so that was why they would have kept it shorter. And Mick didn't do much, and then he also notes that White didn't do much either. I laughed at that.
They didn't do a whole lot other than making Big Show look like more of an idiot because he got disqualified. He got disqualified, and So now Mick Foley becomes the special guest referee, and then Vince comes down to the ring to remind him of what he just did. And then Big Show teases the turn where he was going to give Vince the choke slam, but then he ends up just knocking out Vince because Vince just called him a big idiot and how stupid he was and that he's going to listen to him. I don't, they end up taking Vince back. He calls the cops on Big Show. It made Big Show look like a total moron, and they just kept beating the crap out of Mick Foley again. Like, I just don't understand why they continued to do this.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to debut a guy like all of this. And again, I don't know if it was we came to terms and then we came to terms and we weren't happy with how he showed up physically. I don't know if how he rubbed people when he got to, I don't know the answer, but I do know that I remember being a young internet fan at that time, hearing he was coming and thinking, dude, this is it. Like, this is the biggest get they ever could have got. And right away, I thought that his debut was fine in that, he came through the ring and through Austin, through the cage, like whatever, it's a cool thing. And I mean, cool enough that they've replicated it 40 times since then.
Right.
But yeah, it is strange. It's just strange as to what went on here.
Yeah, it really was. We have an Intercontinental Championship with the Four Corners elimination match. It is Road Dogg as the champion versus Val Venus versus Goldust and Ken Shamrock. I was genuinely perplexed by the pop that Road Dogg got. Like, I didn't realize how big, and when you mentioned that they were a bigger draw, him and Billy Gunn were bigger draws, I was genuinely perplexed at their pop that they got.
Dave noted a couple of times throughout all of these observers that the wrestling fan in 1999 gives no shits about great wrestling and cares everything about talking the main event.
Yeah.
And Road Dogg had a great entrance and he got crowd engagement and kept them engaged with those little, the doggy style dance and those other little things he did. So he was a gem here in that he was able to rope him in, great entrance music and all that. And I think that was where that was born of, is that we have a different kind of fan here than we did in 1992.
It really was a lot different. And, contrary to popular belief, but Val Venus sucks. And it was apparent in this match. They do a thing where Shamrock and Venus, they get eliminated by count out, both of them at the same time. I thought that it was stupid, but then Shamrock ends up running in and killing everybody. Road Dogg wins because Shamrock's sister accidentally interferes with Goldust, and then they do the little roll up action, and Road Dogg retains here. I mean, it was okay, but it just man, it's just like we can't get a good match or anything exciting here. I felt like.
Yeah, Brian Shamrock trying to low blow on Goldust, somehow didn't hit it. Goldust hit Dogg with a power slam, but in doing so, Dogg maneuvered him into a small package for the pin. 1.5 stars. That seems like a lot, man. Interesting you said about the Venus being bad, though, because he was one of those, like, not good ratings movers in the 98 write-up, and he gets phased out here pretty quick. And you know what's crazy? He's remembered as being, dude, do you remember?
Yeah.
And we got another guy that just...
It's just the craziness of characters versus work, like we talked about in the WrestleMania 20 show. We cut backstage. Big Show ends up getting arrested because Vince shows up there. But then we get Triple H versus Kane. Chyna ended up turning on Triple H. She joined the corporation, but in there, she kind of fell in a thing with Kane. Kane tries to shoot her with the pyro. It hits her in the face, and then it's switched off where then Triple H has to go hit Kane with this enormous fireball. There was a lot of stuff here. But the chicken that you mentioned from before, he ends up attacking Kane in his entrance. Pete Rose back again, call back to WrestleMania 14. Kane gets in the ring, choke slams him, sends him to hell. Triple H comes through the crowd with a low blow. We have a Teddy Long as a ref sighting I have written here. They did a ton of ringside brawling But the big thing about this match is that China comes down, she turns on Kane. Triple H and China are now back together, and it seems like a reforming of DX here. So that was the big thing with this match. This is where I felt like a higher point in the show. This is definitely the highest point in the show. Actually, somewhat of a good match that they actually had.
Dave gives one a star and a quarter. I remembered specifically, and I'm very, very glad that you ended the way that you did there, because me and all my friends were just 360 high-fiving that China is back, DX is back, here we go. Yeah. I absolutely thought that was it. I was so happy. And Dave notes that the crowd popped huge to see these two back together. So, yeah, just wild, man. The twists, the turns, all this that happens from January 25th to now is something else. On to the next, right?
Yes, on to the next. We have a big pun sighting ringside, which I thought was funny. We have the Sable and Tori Women's Championship match, and I have written again, this is an absolute disaster, and that's the second time I've had to say something about a WrestleMania. The only thing of note here really is that this was absolute garbage, and that we had a Nicole Bass sighting, and she actually gave the big body plex better than Ultimate Warrior probably did. So I don't know. It was something. It was not very good.
Yeah, Dave says that this is absolutely the worst match of the year. They were blowing every spot, couldn't work together at all. Sable loudly was complaining in the ring that Tori was hurting her and being too stiff. And like everything else in the match, this didn't happen when Sable set up a powerbomb. Tori was supposed to land on her feet. Nicole Bass, which I put underline, exclamation point, ran into the ring for about 30 seconds early for the run-in. Impressed Tori, dropped her, -2 stars.
Yeah, so we go backstage with DX, and they say they're whole again and that nothing can split them up, and that X-Pac is going to beat Shane and become the European champion. So that leads us to the Shane McMahon X-Pac European Championship match. Patterson and Briscoe, they attack X-Pac in his entrance, and then Pac lays him out pretty quickly. Early in the match, I was kind of wondering why Test had the weight belt on over his belt on his pants. It looked ridiculous, but then it ended up being used later on in the match by both Shane and X-Pac. The big moment here was when Test hit Pac with the title belt. It was a big near fall for Shane. Triple H and China come out to save X-Pac, but then the big turn happens where Trips turns on X-Pac, and they both join the corporation, both Triple H and China. They go back to the corporation, and Shane retains the European Championship.
2 3/4 star match, man. Like this, the work here, and again, I remember being a child and thinking, "Holy cow, those guys were awesome."
So we have the one that this is certainly a head scratcher that you thought that Dave wrote that he thought that this was going to break the 4.5 star average for a Hell in a Cell match. And that's everything but what we got in this match. Undertaker's never ending quest to destroy the corporation in the latest chapter. This was, I was perplexed as why. I know that you said that Boss Man was the luckiest man in wrestling at this point where he got thrusted into this, but this was not a good Hell in a Cell match. It was very quick. They basically did some quick brawling, and then all of a sudden Undertaker had him up in the tombstone. Obviously, the match was short because of everything that happened afterwards. So the Brood comes down from the ceiling on top of the cell. They throw a noose through the top of the cell, and Undertaker hangs the Boss Man. Yes, I'm not even joking. I literally said that. They hung the fucking Boss Man in the ring for everyone to see, and then they just cut to the rage party. It was absurd. This sucked. This was by far Undertaker. I don't know. I know that a lot of people say that maybe, Undertaker's had some worse matches, but this is by far one of the worst Undertaker matches you'll ever see in your life. It is awful.
Yeah, Dave gives this one a dud. So total dud. So this is the first Hell in a Cell is a 4-star match. I'm assuming that because the average was 4.25, that Taker and Mick Foley is about 4, so this is a high bar. This is a big blow off. This is huge things happen here. and this one gets a dud. This was right up here. This was a calamity of a match. The boss man delivered a few nightstick shots. Gimmicked handcuffs he put on Undertaker broke way too early. This left poor Undertaker in the embarrassing position of having to stay in the position and pretend to be helpless and trapped while Boss Man continued the planned beating. Both men juiced. The Philadelphia crowd didn't react one iota to the blood. Loud, boring chants. The finish was a tombstone out of nowhere. The Brood, who have recently joined the ministry, come down. They throw the news through the cage, as John had mentioned. And then he ends this with Boss Man was literally being hung, acting as if he passed out. I guess this really is a Roadrunner cartoon. Maybe this was a spot where they should have told kids not to try to imitate this stuff at home.
It's crazy that we have all of this and then we segue into the biggest match of the year, which is the main event of WrestleMania. And it's Rock Austin 1. And we have Vince as a special guest referee. So we have Jim Ross that comes out. He joins the commentary team to replace Michael Cole. Jim Ross had the Bell's palsy flare up there in December, I believe, of 98. So Vince comes down. Commissioner Michaels music hits. So we do get the Shawn Michaels sighting at WrestleMania. There was an enormous crowd pop for HBK here. He says that that Vince needs to read the rule book, and there's only one man that can appoint an official at WrestleMania, and that man is the commissioner. He kicks Vince out of the ring and bars the corporation from ringside. So the other thing of note here is that we end up having 4 officials during this match. Mike Chioda is your ref for the start of the match. And the crowd is molten lava for all of this. They are fired up. It is crazy how much the crowd hung with them throughout this entire main event here. Rock is shirtless here for the first time in months. And like we had mentioned earlier, Rock, he had the advantage early. They brawled into the crowd. The fans were ridiculous here. They fought more getting back to the ring than they did actually with each other. They did fight up to the stage, and Austin did this back body drop onto the floor lights. Thought that Austin tore his knee off. I thought his leg broke in half the way that it hit that steel bar. Rocky got thrown into the WrestleMania sign, and it was waving back and forth. That was pretty crazy too. Some brawling back into the ring, and whenever they get in the ring, Rock gives him a rock bottom out of nowhere. Then he gets mad because the Rock cuts off Austin after a near fall. And that's where he gives Timmy White the rock bottom. Then all of a sudden, Austin stunners Rock. And here comes referee number 3, which is Earl Hebner, for a near fall. Vince, who was barred from ringside, just shows up. He takes out Earl Hebner. So we don't have a referee again. We're down to our 3rd referee being knocked out. We have a huge crowd pop for Mankind as he struts that ass down to the ramp. Mankind ends up becoming your special guest referee and the 4th referee of this match. Austin moved out of the way of the people's elbow. Rock tried a rock bottom. It gets countered into a stunner for the 1, 2, 3. And Stone Cold is your champion. Back-to-back main events for Steve here. And they go into the summer where Austin ends up eventually getting the news about his neck. And where we have a big title turnover into SummerSlam. But I think that the fun of all of this WrestleMania comes after. So I know that you have some notes here, but we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Big story.
Yes. This is everything, right? Like these are the 2 main guys that have lived on, 25 years? Yeah. 25 years later. It's wild to think that this was the first one, right? That this was the first major main event that these guys were going to have. This also comes off of Austin. I do believe he vacated the IC title. Rock's first IC championship. I'm fairly certain that was off of the back of Austin vacating the belt because they wanted him to lose it to Rock.
Yeah, I think so.
And he said, no way, Jose, this guy ain't it.
Yep.
And here they are, right? So to get here, I did want to note that Rock did beat Mankind in what Dave called the second best match he had seen that year on the Monday Night Raw after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It was in a ladder match. I guess Rock and Mankind lit it up. tore it down, ended up with Paul White, the Big Show, but Paul White at that time was catalyst to the finish there, and it brings us here. So we have the uber ultimate heat on Rock because super babyface Mick screwed out of his championship. The hero of a generation, Stone Cold Steve Austin, anti-hero of a generation, maybe I should say, versus The Rock. And Dave it's not raving reviews, but he says that it's really good. He does note that Austin went to put The Rock through the Spanish announcer's table. This spot has become a cliche. And I noted this match happened so long ago that this spot just became a cliche because we've been talking about the Spanish announce table, I feel like, for 20 years, and that makes sense. The note that I have here after this 3.5-star match is how excited Earl Hebner was to drink with Steve Austin after this match.
Yeah,
I remembered it then. I remember when I watched it back. And Dave even notes, he literally says Earl Hebner seemed way more excited than Austin about winning the title, drank beer with Austin, and then Austin decked Vince after the match and delivered a stunner and poured beer on him. So that was it. That was something, man.
It really was. It was a one-match show, and this is kind of what I want this WrestleMania this year to be, an overbooked, crazy as hell mess. And because it was really good at the end, this is the only thing that was good on this show that is of note, that should be remembered for. So what happens after WrestleMania? This is the first time I ever watched it myself. I watched it from front to back. It's this Outside the Lines report. So take us into this Outside the Lines report.
Yeah, so I wanted John to see this because this is the main story of The Observer from post-WrestleMania obviously was WrestleMania. But once I read the words, if there was anything Outside the Line special on ESPN brought home, it was that nobody learned anything as to what nearly brought this industry to its knees 7 years ago. And once I thought of that, I was like, oh my God, I remember Bob Lee sitting there and just flame blowing, torching the whole industry. And so I sent that over to John. I said, John, you got to check this out. And John, I have the bloody details here that we can look at, and we don't need to go segment by segment. We don't have the time for that. But your first impression from what you saw of that time capsule of Bob Lee, because when Bob Lee comes knocking, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So from the ESPN Outside the Lines deal on the pro wrestling industry in 1999, what'd you think?
I thought that the first 18 minutes of it, they really praised everything that the wrestling business did. It was interesting to see that they had both WCW and WWF on the same program together. It just absolutely got flipped on its head instantly. And they just started taking a flamethrower to the WWF and how it's a nationwide monster and it needs to be stopped. The things that Vince did, it's no wonder, hindsight, after what's kind of just happened the last couple of months, Vince literally said there's no portrayal of murder, and they throw a clip of Val Venus getting his what cut off on a butcher's block on Raw. And then Vince laughed out loud at the Mark Henry scene that we talked about. Vince laughed out loud in ESPN's face. This was something. I can't believe the way that Vince portrayed himself here. It was so bad. It's whenever Bob Lee, when you see the Outside the Lines theme music play and Bob Lee's showing up, you're about to get torched, and he absolutely laid waste to them.
Yeah, so it touched on every bit of it. And when I was a kid, I remembered getting hot because I was like, don't let this take away my wrestling, right? Like, I do seriously remember thinking that. As an adult, I can go through this and say, wow, this is, as far as whatever docu-series go or investigative pieces go, this is pretty fair and balanced.
Yes.
Like, they actually show good and then they show bad. It's just the bad at this time is absolutely terrible. So it does note that they're in an indie promotion too. and they show an indie booking. They showed an indie booking meeting, and here's what we're going to do tonight. And, don't forget about the kids, and slap the hands and kiss the babies for if you're a baby face. If you're a heel, make sure you're like the way that it used to be, right? And then we get into Brian Pillman.
Yeah.
And we talk about Brian Pillman that's taking, over the last year and a half of his life, took a shot a day of growth hormone, also was on painkillers, decadurabolin, which is another steroid, cocaine, all these things at the time of his death. So that starts that. Widow, I should say, has receipts from a clinic, an HGH clinic, a youth clinic, points the finger at Hulk Hogan. More than one person point the finger at Hulk. And Hulk, of course, has no idea, which is, par for the course there. Louis Piccoli is a sad story.
Yes.
And then here was the thing that really stuck out to me was they get into the bad. And when they get into the bad, they get into the very bad. So, of course, the deaths matter. And Dave's big issue with this, which slaps you like oh my gosh, it's just a splash of cold water, is that 2 people died in short order that were young, and one would assume they could have been preventable deaths. And nothing changed within the industry.
Nope.
Nothing with drug testing, nothing with awareness, nothing with anything like that. And, then we end up a couple of years later with more deaths. And Dave actually calls that at the end of this, which is sad. But for the part where it talks about like the social impact, they showed the attempted castration of Val Venus, like John said. McMahon defended it because there was no actual castration. And these are Dave's words, not mine. The simulated blowjob by the transvestite on Mark Henry. And then they played that in front of McMahon, who attempted some very contrived laughter as his defense, which only made him come off worse. And this is the thing that it gave me the yeebie-jeebies, dude. They showed a 13-year-old student had been suspended for school 3 times for telling the girls in his class to suck it. They showed a kindergartner suspended, and when asked what suck it meant, said to suck his private parts. And they noted other kids that were suspended for copying scenes from the Raw show. Look, man, I got a little child, and I would be furious. I mean it, like I would be furious. And you know what's even crazier is the first time that I ever got a demerit in school. I was in 8th grade. I went 6th and 7th grade, never even being looked at. I got my first demerit in 8th grade because I wrote the whole effing show on my gym teacher's whiteboard.
Wow.
So this wasn't Vince, but this was wrestling.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole effing show. Effing show. Because that was the, huge thing in ECW at the time. And then Dave pulls up argument, counter argument, back to back, which are pretty interesting. If you did not know, John, that WWF Raw was rated TV PG until 1 month ago.
What?
So that meant that the Mark Henry BJ
Was
hands up.
G?
Correct.
Oh my! No wonder they were saying stuff like this.
Correct. The thing here is that there's an argument that NYPD Blue and daytime soap operas show a lot of the same stuff. Dave's counter argument: kids aren't going to school talking about these shows, nor do these shows draw any kind of under 12 demographic, nor do they advertise and market directly to children, and neither show airs simulated blowjobs on television.
Oh my.
And there's, he ain't wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
And then they get into, the parent backlash. McMahon says that there's no using knives as a weapon. And that was blown to bits because they showed an actual TV angle where the ministry had a body that appeared to be carved open with a knife. McMahon did admit marketing to children, although that he said that Mark Henry's blowjob angle was totally inappropriate for a 9-year-old after a soundbite of a 9-year-old that watched it and attempted to explain what it was. So, dude, they went in. I mean, that's just it. Like, you would have cut to the core, people, is you have kids do it. And my assumption here, ESPN, is that you didn't pre-screen these kids in front of kids, that we took kids that we polled families and said, do you watch this or not? But that's a really rough thing. And then the big argument there was that the WWF had was that they don't need to watch it. And the counter argument that Dave said stands up is that a parent said that I can monitor my own kids' television consumption, but I can't monitor every kid in my schools.
Yep.
And so if they're going to bring this thing or these things and topics and content into the school, what are we supposed to do? And I thought that was pretty wild.
Yes, it was wild. That puts a nice little bow on the end of WrestleMania 15. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on the socials at @the_Podski on Twitter and Instagram. Next week, we will be doing the WrestleMania preview show. Going to WrestleMania next weekend. So we're going to preview kind of what we're doing and the card, and then we'll have some bonus shows while we're there too. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you to Teddy Mongoose for all of the news and the notes. And with that, we will see you next time on the Podski.